Hi, I'm Mike Richter, and today I'm going to be talking to you about an overview to real estate as an investment, and really the four basic starting points that you can start your real estate investment journey from. So here's an overview. We'll talk about buy and hold, where you purchase a property and you rent it out to someone else, pay your expenses with the rent, and you keep the positive cash flow. We'll also talk about flipping. Basic idea of that is you purchase a property that needs help, needs repairs, you fix it, and then you sell it to somebody on the retail housing market. Next, we'll talk about wholesaling, where your job as a wholesaler is to find great deals, get them under contract, and sell the deal, which is the value you bring as a wholesaler, to an end buyer, whether it's a flipper or a buy and holder. And finally, we'll talk about one of my favorite ways to get started in real estate, and that's house hacking. This is where you get to leverage the ability to get owner-occupied financing to buy multi-unit buildings, and then you get to live in one, rent out the others, and basically live rent-free for the rest of your life. And that's fantastic. So let's move on. Starting with buy and hold. So the basic idea is you buy the property, you rent it out, and the tenants pay your mortgage. And you build equity and cash flow over time. So what does that look like? So say I buy a property and it costs me $70,000. I put a down payment down and I rent it out. So I rent it for, say, $1,000 a month, and my mortgage and all of my expenses are about $600 a month. So I take in $1,000 a month, I pay out $600 in expenses, and I keep the remaining $400 a month as cash flow. So not only do I get the cash flow every month from that rental agreement, I also get the tenants are basically the ones that are paying my mortgage. One of the expenses is the mortgage. And part of that mortgage is principal on it. That's part of what I owe. And every month, that principal amount goes down a little bit each month. So that's another way that I'm gaining wealth over time. And you can also build equity. That's every year you can find appreciation as one part of the equity building that happens. So say that house that I bought for $70,000, we'll say that it appreciates at a rate of about 3% a year. So after my first year of owning the house, if it is appreciating at 3% a year, it goes from being worth $70,000 and becomes worth $21,000. Now, for the purposes of this video, that's how it went. In reality, I bought it for $70,000, it was worth $90,000, and so I ended up getting a $20,000 discount on it. So the day that I closed on the property, I made $20,000 in net worth, and that was a fantastic thing for me and my family. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons associated with buy and hold. One of the pros associated with it is I get to benefit from all of the real estate advantages as an investment class. I get appreciation on a physical asset. The house value tends to go up on a year-over-year basis. I get to benefit from the fact that it is cash flow. If I'm renting for more than my expenses are, I keep the difference as cash flow. My renters are paying down my mortgage, which is a fantastic thing. And the way the money that I make is taxed is way better in terms of taxes than it would be with all different kinds of other ways I could be making money, even flipping, even wholesaling, even working day to day. Because the nature of the income is passive, it gets tax advantages, which is awesome. And I end up making money in my sleep with the rental properties. And who doesn't like making money in their sleep? It's a fantastic thing. So let's talk about some of the cons associated with it. We've got tenants. So if I've got a buy and hold property, I have tenants in them. So if the tenant screening process isn't so good and I've got bad tenants in the properties, maybe I end up having to do more repair work or more make ready next time I have a tenant. Now, the thing about it is a portion of my rent ends up going to an account that I've got that is there just in case something bad happens. I get to go ahead and draw from that account and it takes care of it. That way I'm not worrying about if something happens, whether or not my kids are going to have food to eat at any given month. It's not a problem for me. Another thing about tenants is For all of my properties, I have property managers that manage the properties on my behalf. So they do the tenant screening process. So that takes a lot of the work off of me. They do a great job of finding good people to rent my places. I've got pretty nice houses, so it works out very well. Another thing about buy and hold is you've got this thing called holding costs. So right when you purchase the property, usually there's some things that you have to do to it to make it ready to rent in your local market area. Not only that, but you have to advertise. There's that time between when you buy it and when you have a renter actually paying you rent on the property. And those costs associated with it are called holding costs. So what I do is every time I purchase a property, I know that I'm going to be holding the property for about a month before the property is rented and making positive cash flow for me. So I make sure to keep all of the expenses that I know I'm going to have to pay for a month, and I keep that aside in a bank account so that when those expenses come, I'm ready for it. And if it takes less time than a month, great. I'm already prepared for it. Over the last few years, the average time that I've had to wait is about 3 weeks. So a month has been a good thing for me and my family. And finally, you've got this thing called market risk. Now, chances are you're going to have a time where market values are either stagnant or they go up. And either of those are good things for you. You're making money in both scenarios. If the value is staying stagnant, you're still getting your mortgage paid down, and it's still a good thing. If the value is going up every year, then you're getting that appreciation adding to your net worth, and that's awesome. But sometimes you're going to have an issue where, say, 2007, 2008 roll around, and you end up having a significant problem. Now, the first house I bought when I was 22 years old, and I had just gotten out of tech training when I was back in the military. And my wife and I bought a house in Baltimore, and we bought pretty much at the top of the market. We didn't know anything about real estate. We just knew that we had saved so much over the last few months that we really wanted to make an investment in real estate. And we said investment loosely because we really didn't understand investing at the time. So that was the end of 2006 when we purchased. Come 2007, 2008, the whole mortgage bubble burst, and we ended up significantly underwater on our property because we put very little down. We bought at the top of the market. We bought at retail prices, which is a huge mistake. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that it was a good thing to just wait for a good deal instead of just jumping in when we were emotionally charged. I'll put up a couple of videos about when the right time to buy is and all of that. But there are good times, there are bad times to deal with real estate, and I took on a lot of market risk that I really didn't understand at the time. So that's one of the key cons to buy and hold real estate. So let's move on to flipping. This is one of the real estate strategies that gets a lot of press. There's a lot of shows on like HGTV that talk about people that make hundreds of thousands of dollars flipping houses one at a time. And the basic idea of flipping is you purchase a property that really needs repairs, and usually there's a motivated seller behind it. And you buy it, you fix it up, and you sell it at retail usually. There are some other more advanced strategies that we could talk about, like the BRRRR strategy in another video. For those that don't know, BRRRR is buy, rehab, rent, and refinance. It is a fantastic way to combine elements of the flipping process and the buy and hold strategy. So once again, flipping is basically you buy a property that needs help, then you fix it up, and then you sell it to an end buyer. Usually it's a retail buyer, some family that just wants a home, a nice home, and you provide it for them. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of flipping. So the pros, it could be a really great way of raising investment capital if you don't have any. So maybe you know some people that are really good with their hands. Maybe you know a contractor, and you can form a partnership with them. You find a house that's a great deal, and you contract with them to do the work. And when you sell the property at a profit, you split the profits because you guys are partners. That's one way to get into real estate investing without much money down. And you want to make sure that when you get into a partnership that you know what you're doing, who's doing what, and the rules of the partnership are laid out very clearly ahead of time. That way there's no arguments or misunderstandings later on down the road. Another issue with flipping, as far as cons, you've got the fact that it's taxed as self-employment income. So when you work, the IRS taxes you differently than it does if you are just investing for the sake of investing and that you're a passive partner in that. So that's something very important to realize, is there's a different way that you're taxed between when you're passive and when you're active in an enterprise. And in the case of real estate investing, flipping is considered an active activity for the purposes of income tax. So that's something you want to be understanding of. And then finally, we'll talk about huge market risk. So remember when I was talking about the issues in 2007 and 2008? Well, a lot of people that had been doing flips for a long time, for decades prior to 2006, 2007, they got used to the idea that houses typically go up in value over time. And so they were purchasing properties, doing their flips, and it was a good business for them. Well, in 2007 and 2008, a lot of people stopped being able to afford their mortgages as adjustable rates at the time went up beyond what they can afford. So there were a lot of foreclosures on the market. And so with the market flooded with foreclosures, it was very hard for you to get a profitable price on your flip. So a lot of people that were doing flipping really went under at that point in time. So you want to buy at a significant enough discount that you can overcome a lot of the market risk. So we talked about flipping and its pros and cons. Let's move on to wholesaling. So once again, the bottom line of wholesaling is the value you bring to the table is you have pre-negotiated deals. You're out there looking for people that are motivated sellers. You get a deal under contract at a price that makes sense for your end buyer. Your end buyer is usually a flipper or somebody that is a buy and hold investor, and you want to make sure that the deal makes sense on paper. You want to check out the property, make sure that it's in decent enough shape or that there's no obvious things wrong that you haven't accounted for in your deal. And you basically sell the right to buy the property to your end buyer. And that's really what you end up doing. That act of selling the opportunity to purchase is collecting an assignment fee. You assign your rights to that purchase of the property to your end buyer. And that's what you're compensated for. So let's talk about some pros and cons with wholesaling. One of the best pros associated with wholesaling is it's usually the least upfront investment of money if you're going it solo. We talked about briefly in the flipping portion of the video that if you partner up with somebody, then potentially they can put up some of the money. Well, in wholesaling, the biggest things that you need to make sure that you're putting up is money for an option fee so that you can get out of a contract if you need to, and earnest money. That's money that you put up to kind of show that you have a vested interest in purchasing the property. And one of the cool things about wholesaling is the amount of money you can make in wholesaling is only limited to how many deals you can find at a given period of time and how many deals you can sell to your end buyers. And that's fantastic. Your speed of deal flow is what limits you on your income. Now, a couple of the cons associated with wholesaling is there's a steep learning curve. You have to know a lot about basic real estate. And I'm going to be putting up a whole video series on wholesaling and how to go about doing it and doing it right. That way, you make sure that you build a good name for yourself, first and foremost, because having a good reputation builds you long-term business, and the actual mechanics of what you want to look for in wholesaling. And the next thing that's a negative about it is wholesaling is considered self-employment for the most part. The fact that you are active in finding deals and selling the deal to somebody else, the money that you make on that is taxed as if it's self-employment. So that's something that you need to be aware of when you're filling out your taxes for the next year. So we talked about wholesaling. Let's move on to my favorite way to get started in real estate and how somebody can do it with fairly low amounts down, and that's house hacking. Now, There are a couple ways to do this. You can either purchase a multi-unit property like a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex. You live in one unit and you rent out the rest. Basically, they pay your mortgage, they pay you a little bit extra, and you're living rent-free for the rest of your life. And that's awesome. Another way you can do it is you can buy a fairly large single-family house that's more than the needs that you or your family have and rent out extra rooms. And you may or may not be comfortable with that, but the point is that strategy exists. It's a way for you to make money on your purchase and really take away from some of the costs associated with owning your own home. So let's talk about pros and cons on house hacking. So the obvious pros are tenants are paying your rent or your mortgage, or at least a portion of it if you're doing a single family rent a room kind of deal. And you can get advantageous financing. Financing is one of the biggest deals in real estate investing. It's where do I get the money to buy these houses? Well, if I'm going to buy a $100,000 house, I'm not going to pay $100,000 cash for it. Usually, I'm going to use this concept called leverage, where I'll put down $20,000 or $25,000 and then get a bank or somebody to loan me the remaining $75,000 or $80,000. That way, if I had $100,000, I'm only using a little bit on that one deal. And if I'm buying 4 or 5 deals, I'm benefiting on the wealth creation of 4 or 5 properties instead of one property. And that's a huge deal in real estate investing. Now, the biggest con associated with house hacking is you've got your tenants nearby. If you've got a multi-unit property like a fourplex, well, you live in one of the units. As long as you don't make it obvious that you're the owner of the property, you probably won't have too many complaints coming to your front door unless you manage your own properties. But if you have somebody else managing the properties for you, then it's a lot easier to deal with. But if you've got a single family house and you're renting rooms, well, unfortunately, you end up living with your tenants, and hopefully you have a good relationship with them. But that's, in a nutshell, how you can end up house hacking and what the pros and cons are of it. So now that we talked about 4 basic strategies to get started in real estate, let's recap. So the first way that I talked about was buy and hold real estate. This is where you purchase a property and you hold it, you rent it out to somebody for positive cash flow, and you end up creating wealth over time in your sleep. It's a very passive activity once you set up the system to make it passive, and it's a great thing. And that's what I do for all of my real estate deals at this point in time. The next step is flipping. That's where you buy a property that needs help, you help it, and then you sell it to a retail buyer after the fact. Next, you've got wholesaling, where the value you bring is the deal itself. You are negotiating a deal, you put the deal under contract, and then you sell that contract to an end buyer, either a flipper or a buy and holder. And finally, we talked about house hacking, where you can leverage owner-occupied financing. We'll talk ins and outs about financing in another video, but you leverage that very important thing, and you get other people to end up paying your mortgage, and you live rent-free for the rest of your life. And that's a fantastic thing, to not have to worry about paying for where you live. So if you found this video to be useful, or to kind of inspire you to think about starting in real estate investing, please let me know. Give me a comment down below, and if you want to see more, let me know what you'd like to know about. And if you would, please, if you found value in this video, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thanks for your time. Have a fantastic day.